Have you ever stood in a room full of smiles and felt a chill down your spine? That uneasy silence, that lingering gaze, that subtle, almost imperceptible pause before someone answers your question. No explosions, no shouting, no blood on the walls. Just the eerie calm before a betrayal you never saw coming. This is not a story about drama. It's not about feuds or fights. It's about something far colder, far more dangerous, the silent enemy. Because not every war begins with a declaration. Some begin with a handshake. We live in a world obsessed with noise. Those who shout the loudest, post the most, flex their opinions like weapons. But those aren't the ones who truly worry me. No, the ones I watch for are quiet, calculated, kind, even. They hide their intentions behind politeness, behind small favors, behind the illusion of friendship. I've met them, so have you. You just didn't know it yet. They could be the colleague who always compliments your work, but subtly shifts blame to you when something goes wrong. The friend who offers support during your worst days, only to use your secrets as leverage weeks later. The family member who smiles at every success you share, while resenting every bit of it inside. And here's the terrifying truth. The most dangerous enemy is the one who wears no mask. Because they've made your trust their disguise. You see, betrayal doesn't always come wrapped in fury. It often arrives with a smile. And the erosion, it doesn't happen all at once. It's not a landslide, it's a slow drip, a quiet shifting of earth beneath your feet until, one day, you fall into a void you didn't know was being carved out all along. I once trusted someone with everything. My dreams, my doubts, my rawest, unfiltered moments. They never once raised a red flag. In fact, they raised a glass. But here's where the lesson cuts the deepest. While I was busy being loyal, they were busy keeping score. And when the time was right, when the stakes were highest, they struck, not with a dagger, but with distance, with silence, with calculated moves that left no fingerprints, only fractures. They didn't need to scream. They whispered, and that whisper echoed longer than any shout ever could. That's the thing about silent enemies. They don't just wound your pride. They dismantle your foundation. Bit by bit, piece by piece, you begin to doubt your own memory. Did I say something wrong? Maybe I misunderstood. It's probably just me being sensitive. No, it's not. You are not paranoid. You are perceptive. There is a difference, and that's what this video is about. Not fear, not suspicion, but power. Your power, the ability to see through the fog of charm, the strength to stand your ground when manipulation tries to masquerade as kindness, the clarity to spot the subtle cues before they grow into chains. Because the sooner you notice, the sooner you stop the bleeding. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you ignored a gut feeling, only to regret it later? When you excused behavior that didn't sit right, when you laughed off the comment that cut too deep, when you told yourself, they didn't mean it like that. Yes, they did. That smile, it wasn't warmth. It was camouflage. That compliment, It wasn't praise, it was positioning. That silence, it wasn't peace, it was preparation. This is the art of erosion. The quiet, cruel way your defenses are dismantled by someone who swore to protect them. And you never see it coming until the damage is done. You might think, but I'm a good person. I give people the benefit of the doubt. I believe in second chances. And that's beautiful, but let me ask you something darker. What if that's exactly what they're counting on? What if your goodness is their greatest weapon? Because the most silent enemies don't attack your strength. They seduce your compassion. They don't outfight you. They outlast you. They'll let you speak, let you shine, let you trust. And then, they'll wait for your moment of vulnerability. Not to help, to harvest, to gather every seed of your self-doubt, water it with subtle gaslighting, and then stand back as it blooms into insecurity. And the worst part, when it happens, you'll defend them. Because that's how deep their influence runs. That's how meticulously they've drawn the lines of trust. They've made themselves immune to your suspicion. They've cloaked themselves in your loyalty. And when the betrayal finally comes, you won't just be hurt. You'll be confused, because the enemy didn't look like a threat. They looked familiar. They looked like someone you loved. Now, this isn't a call to build walls or close your heart, but it is a call to pay attention. Not every smile deserves your trust. Not every "I've got your back" means you're safe. Look deeper. How do they act when you fail? When you succeed? When you're vulnerable? When you say no? Those are the moments when truth reveals itself, not in words, but in the pauses between them. Here's something I've learned the hard way. Loyalty is beautiful, but blind loyalty is dangerous. Trust should be earned, not just given. And boundaries? They're not walls. They're filters. They don't keep people out. They keep truth in. So ask yourself, who drains your energy without ever lifting you up? Who only calls when they need something? Who disappears when you're the one in need? Who celebrates your silence but not your voice? These are not just patterns. They're warnings. And here's the twist. Sometimes, the silent enemy isn't even a person. Sometimes it's a voice inside you. The one that says, "You're not enough." The one that echoes the insults others whispered. The one that tells you to stay quiet, stay small, stay agreeable. That's the enemy within, and it's learned every trick from the enemies around you. But here's the beautiful part. Just as erosion can destroy, awareness can rebuild. Once you see it, truly see it, you can't unsee it. You start to notice the shift in tone, the way someone changes when you're winning, the smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes, the praise that comes laced with doubt. And slowly, you reclaim your power. You stop explaining yourself to those who never listened. You stop shrinking for those who fear your light. You stop handing weapons to people who never laid down theirs. You stop bleeding for people who never intended to stop the bleeding. Because once you recognize the silent enemy, you realize the loudest thing they fear is your awareness. Your voice, your boundaries, your refusal to play their game. And no matter how soft they speak, No matter how carefully they plan, your truth, once awakened, is louder than all of it. So if you've ever been betrayed without warning, if you've ever felt the sting of a smile that meant sabotage, if you've ever stood at the edge of a friendship and realized you were the only one who showed up fully, you're not alone. I see you, and this voice, this isn't just mine, it's yours. It's every story never told, every gut feeling ignored, every moment someone said, "I'm fine," when they were being torn apart quietly. We carry these scars not as shame, but as maps that help us navigate better, love smarter, guard deeper, not with fear, but with clarity. Because power isn't found in suspicion, it's found in presence, in choosing to watch, to question, to remember that not every enemy wears black. Some wear white, some wear your name, some wear your smile, and the most dangerous ones wear nothing at all. Just silence. But now that you've heard this, now that the truth has landed, silence will never fool you again. They walk among us, unnoticed by most. Their presence is quiet, but persistent. They don't seek the spotlight, yet they always seem to know where the light will fall next. You never quite remember inviting them into your life, but somehow, they're already in, commenting on things they shouldn't know, laughing at jokes they shouldn't have heard, showing up in places they had no reason to be. They make it look accidental, harmless, but it's not. This is not coincidence. This is choreography. The silent observer doesn't ask questions. They already know the answers. Because they've been watching, listening, collecting, not because they care, but because they calculate. Every status you post, every place you check into, every new connection you make, each one a breadcrumb. And while you're busy living, they're busy tracing your steps, not forward, but backward, not for celebration, but for control. These are not just people, these are patterns in disguise. And here's where it gets dangerous, because in a world that celebrates transparency, we've forgotten the value of mystery. We've turned privacy into a weakness, and oversharing into virtue. But while you're posting your morning coffee, they're mapping your schedule. While you're tagging your vacation, they're calculating when you're away. While you're venting your frustrations, they're learning your vulnerabilities. I've learned this the hard way. There was someone in my circle, always kind, always supportive, always there, too there. At first, I welcomed it. Who doesn't want a friend who checks in? Who seems genuinely interested in your life? But slowly, things shifted. They mentioned details I never remembered sharing, anticipate moves I hadn't announced. They knew when I was down before I showed it, and when I was rising before I celebrated it. It felt flattering at first. Then, it felt like surveillance. That's when I realized there's a thin line between presence and intrusion. And when someone's attention starts feeling like observation, it's already too late, because here's the brutal truth. Not all interest is rooted in care. Some of it is rooted in control. And the silent observer doesn't need confrontation. They need access. Just access. That's all they ever needed. They sit quietly in the corners of your life, gathering data while you mistake them for friends. They don't need to ask questions when you're willingly giving answers to the world. They don't need to guess your weaknesses when you confess them in captions. They're not just in your home, they're in your habits, and the more consistent you are, the easier you are to predict. They watch the way you move, when you wake, who you trust, how you react. They don't roar before they strike. They blend in. They applaud. They agree. They disappear just long enough to make you forget they're watching, and reappear right when it matters most. You think it's coincidence. It's not. It's precision. And in an age of oversharing, they don't need to hack your phone. They just need to scroll. Let me say this clearly. Not everyone who watches you wants to be you. But not everyone who claps for you wants you to win either. There's a difference between curiosity and surveillance. And when someone seems too curious about the details that don't concern them, it's not harmless, it's strategic. They are not hunting information. They are stockpiling leverage, and you, unknowingly, are feeding it to them. What's the antidote? Unpredictability. Break your patterns. Switch your rhythms. Let silence be your strategy. The loudest person in the room is often the easiest to defeat. But the unpredictable one, the one who doesn't reveal every move, who guards their steps, who disappears for a while and comes back changed, that person becomes unreadable, unbreakable. I started doing it. Stopped tagging my location in real time. Stopped sharing updates before they became results. Stopped explaining myself to people who never earned the right to know. And you know what happened? The silence got louder. The silent observers got nervous. They started probing, asking more, making jokes laced with questions, acting like they cared more than ever, because what they really feared was no longer knowing. And when the silent observer fears the unknown, they reveal their intention. That's the paradox. The less predictable you are, the more transparent they become. They start slipping. They start showing their cards. Because surveillance drives instability, and when you remove the predictability, you take away their power. You shift from being watched to being unwatchable. And in that shift, you reclaim something even more powerful than privacy, control. Because the truth is, you don't owe anyone your patterns. You don't owe anyone your openness. You don't have to explain why you disappear, why you change, why you suddenly become harder to read. You're not being rude, you're being responsible. People say, "You've changed." No, I've adapted to a world where trust must be earned, not assumed, where the loud enemies are easy to block, but the quiet ones, they need a different kind of firewall. Not technology, not passwords, but presence, awareness, disruption. So if someone makes you uneasy without an obvious reason, trust that unease. It's ancient, it's instinct, it's your body catching the frequency of a threat your mind hasn't yet processed. Listen to it. Because while they blend in, while they smile, while they stand just outside the spotlight, your instincts are screaming from the shadows. Something is wrong, not loud, but right. So guard your patterns, protect your rhythms, hide your steps not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Let mystery be your shield, let silence be your sword, because when the silent observer realizes they can no longer read you, they can no longer reach you, and when they can't reach you, they can't hurt you. That's your power, and it's time to own it. They didn't scream, they didn't push, they didn't even point fingers. They simply stopped saying your name, one by one, in rooms where you used to matter. The mention of you evaporated. Your presence wasn't denied, it was dismissed. That's the genius of the quiet betrayal. It doesn't demand your attention. It steals it, slowly, strategically, without a single dramatic exit. At first, it's subtle, a missed invitation, a project you were once central to, now passed on without explanation. Then, it creeps, a joke you're no longer included in, a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. People start talking around you, not to you. And the worst part, you don't even know who started it. Because betrayal like this doesn't wear a name tag. It wears silence. Just like Alex, he wasn't exiled, he was ghosted by his own community. People he trusted, people he supported, people he stood by. When things went wrong, they didn't confront him, they quietly changed direction. They whispered doubts into ears, just enough to seed suspicion. And then they stood back and let the rot set in. I've seen this happen. I've lived it. One moment you're part of the conversation. The next, you're a cautionary tale someone tells in a version that doesn't resemble your truth. It's not rage, it's revision, not war, just withdrawal. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because how do you defend yourself against something no one admits is happening? How do you respond when your accuser has no name, no face, just echoes? This is the quiet betrayal. And here's where it cuts deepest. It's rarely about what you did. It's about what they fear you represent. Your growth, your strength, your independence, your refusal to be manipulated. That's what makes you dangerous to them. Not your mistakes, but your resilience. So they don't confront you, they diminish you. Not by proving you wrong, but by pretending you were never right. Not by disproving your worth, but by quietly suggesting it was never there to begin with. They shift the spotlight, they share credit, they rewrite timelines, and slowly, you feel like a stranger to your own success. But let me say this clearly, you are not invisible. You are being blurred, intentionally. That's the tactic, to erase you without confrontation, to bleed your name out of the narrative until you start questioning if it was ever there. And what's terrifying is how easily others play along, not because they're cruel, but because it's easier to ride the wave of whispers than to stand for the truth. Easier to say nothing than risk being the next target. But here's where your strength is forged. In the silence, in the absence of applause, in the shadows where no one is clapping and no one is watching and you have to choose. Will I still show up for myself? That's the test, not whether they see you, but whether you see yourself. Because your worth was never in their words. It was in your work, your integrity, your growth, Let me be blunt. Don't chase every rumor. You'll drown in them. They multiply. You clarify one, and three more appear. That's the game. To distract you, to pull you out of alignment, to make you fight ghosts instead of building your future. The moment you start explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, you've already lost. Not because you're wrong, but because you're wasting your voice. So don't waste it. Speak through your consistency, through your evolution, through the life you live when no one's watching. Because eventually, people stop listening to noise and start noticing patterns. That's your advantage. While they whisper, you rise. While they subtract, you multiply. While they erase, you engrave. But, and this is important, don't let the betrayal harden you. It's easy to turn cold, to shut down, to vow never to trust again. Don't, because then they win. They didn't just isolate you, they infected you, and you deserve better than that. You deserve a circle that sees you, that knows your truth, that doesn't flinch at gossip or fade in storms. And if you don't have that yet, build it. Slowly, intentionally, one honest connection at a time. Because in a world of shifting alliances and subtle sabotage, your core circle isn't just your safety, it's your shield. Surround yourself with people who correct you in private and defend you in public. Who don't need you to be perfect to be loyal. Who don't vanish the moment things get complicated. That's your foundation. And with that foundation, you don't need to clear your name. Your life will do that for you. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them fill the silence with theories. You move forward. You keep building. Keep healing. Keep evolving so loudly that their whispers can't keep up. Because here's the thing. The quiet betrayal only works if you participate in your own disappearance. If you hand over your name, if you stop showing up, if you dim your light to make others more comfortable, don't stay visible, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then, because the truth has a funny way of resurfacing, like light through a crack. You don't have to expose anyone. You just have to refuse to disappear. That's your rebellion. That's your revenge. And that's how you win. Not by playing their game, but by playing your own. Relentlessly, unapologetically, unshakably. He laughed at your jokes, toasted your victories, shared your table, your stories, your trust. He showed up when others didn't, offered help before you asked, and always seemed to know exactly what to say to make you feel understood. That's the thing about the mask of friendship. It's crafted so perfectly. It feels like home, until it doesn't. Eric didn't break into Adam's life. He was invited, welcomed, embraced. He didn't storm the gates. He had a key. And that's what made him so dangerous. He didn't look like a threat. He looked like a brother. That's the genius of the false friend. They don't come dressed in red flags. They come bearing compliments, support, empathy, and then they wait, watch, collect, not memories, but ammunition. I've seen it before, lived it. The betrayal that doesn't start with a lie, it starts with a bond. It begins in laughter, it ends in silence, because when Eric praised Adam, It wasn't admiration, it was positioning. When he offered help, it wasn't loyalty, it was leverage. And when he was finally confronted, he didn't apologize. He played the victim, spun the story, made Adam seem like the aggressor, the paranoid one, the ungrateful friend. That's the final cut, the moment they twist your pain into their proof. And the worst part, everyone believes them, because false friends don't just deceive you. They build an audience for the moment they need to discredit you. It's a performance, and you didn't even know you were in the script. They study you like a role. They learn your rhythms, your weaknesses, your soft spots, and then, when the time is right, they strike where it hurts most, not just to harm, but to hollow you out. Because betrayal by a stranger wounds, but betrayal by someone you trusted, it changes you, and that change isn't always visible. It happens in the way you hesitate before speaking, the way you replay conversations, the way you stop sharing joy because you're not sure who's genuinely happy for you anymore. That's the aftermath of the mask. You begin to question not just them, but yourself. Did I miss the signs? Was I too trusting? Was it my fault? No, it wasn't. You weren't blind. You were open. You weren't naive. You were kind. But there's a lesson in that pain. And it's this: real friends earn access. False ones perform for it. They rush intimacy, skip the layers, go straight for the core. Not because they care, but because they're calculating. Vulnerability to them is not a bridge, it's a weapon. And here's the hard truth I had to swallow. Not everyone who listens cares. Not everyone who helps loves. And not everyone who stays is safe. Trust is not about time, it's about testing. It's about observation, about space, about letting people reveal themselves slowly, not generously giving them your soul after a few good laughs and a shared secret. Because the Brutus in your life won't stab you in the crowd. He'll do it in private, with a hug. That's why you must beware of those who arrive too quickly, too perfectly, too completely. Real connection takes time. Real trust grows in quiet, consistent acts, not dramatic gestures and instant allegiance. So don't give away your silence, your pain, your fears. They are sacred. And only those who have proven their steadiness in silence deserve to hold the weight of your words. I used to believe in giving everyone a fair shot. I still do, but now I know the cost of giving too much, too soon. I've learned to value observation over assumption, distance over dependence, time over titles. Because loyalty is not loud. It's patient. It doesn't demand attention. It earns it. And once you've seen the mask fall, once you've felt that knife in the back, you start to recognize the red flags in charm. The over-compliments, the excessive interest, the hunger for details that have no business being shared. And you learn, real friendship isn't about how quickly someone enters your life. It's about how honestly they stay. So protect your access, guard your peace, let people prove their intentions, not through words, but through presence, through what they do when you're not shining, when you're not useful, when you're not at your best. Because that's when masks slip. when there's nothing to gain, when your life isn't trending upward, when you're vulnerable, tired, or alone, the real ones stay, the performers exit, and sometimes, they exit with a story you didn't give them permission to tell. But let them go, let the truth trail behind them. Let the silence they leave behind speak louder than any confrontation ever could. You don't need to expose them. Just stop handing them the script, and watch how fast the act falls apart. Because people who depend on manipulation can't survive without your cooperation. And when you stop feeding them access, attention, and approval, they reveal themselves. Desperation always does. So if you've been betrayed by someone you called a friend, I want you to know this. It wasn't your fault. You didn't deserve it. And you are not broken. You are wiser. You've seen the mask. Now you'll never fall for it again. And that's your power. It always begins quietly. A glance held just a little too long. A joke that lands wrong, but not wrong enough to call out. A comment that skirts the edge of insult but hides behind a smile. You feel it in your bones before your brain catches up. Something's off, but you brush it off. Tell yourself not to overthink, and that's exactly what they count on. Because the gradual attack isn't just about aggression, it's about erosion. Little by little, they wear you down. They poke, prod, push, and when you don't push back, they take one step further. That's the cycle, not explosion, escalation, offhand jokes. That's where it starts. You laugh along because you don't want to seem sensitive, but deep down, something stings. Then comes the physical space, a touch on the shoulder that lingers, a step into your personal zone, an apology that doesn't quite feel like one. Just playing, you're imagining things, you're too serious, but you're not, you're observant. And that instinct you feel, it's not fear, it's a warning. These aren't random acts, these are tests. And every time you ignore the test, you pass, but not in the way you think. You pass for someone who tolerates it. And that's when they know they can go further. Because the dangerous ones don't strike when you're ready. They wait until you've convinced yourself they won't. That's how it worked with Mark David Chapman. With Oswald, before the headlines, there were years of spiraling, of resentment that brewed in silence, of behaviors that would have raised alarms, if only someone had taken the whispers seriously before they became screams. And let me be blunt. Violence rarely arrives unannounced. It drips, it shadows, it circles. You don't need to be paranoid. You need to be prepared. Because when someone's behavior makes you feel unsafe, you don't need to justify your discomfort. You need to honor it. The world trains us to ignore subtle threats, to smooth things over, to be nice. But here's the problem. Politeness is not a shield. Clarity is. I remember someone once tried to test me. They laughed at my ideas in a meeting. Just enough to undercut. Not enough to challenge. Then they made comments about how passionate I was. Code for too much. Then came the private messages. The compliments laced with discomfort, that uneasy concern for how I was handling stress. It was manipulation, measured, crafted, waiting to see how far it could go. And when I finally pushed back, they got offended, accused me of overreacting, said I was the problem. That's what happens when you interrupt the escalation. They reveal themselves, because people who depend on slow control can't function in the face of directness. You want to know the truth? Anyone who gets uncomfortable when you set a boundary was never comfortable with respecting you in the first place. And boundaries? They're not confrontational, they're clarifying. They tell the world, this is who I am, this is what I allow. But you need to enforce them early, before the discomfort becomes damage. Before the whisper becomes a roar, before you find yourself saying, I should have known. The world doesn't reward passivity. It rewards presence, awareness, action. So take every sign seriously. Don't wait for it to get worse to validate your instincts. Because when someone repeatedly, accidentally, oversteps, it's not an accident, it's a blueprint. They're studying your reactions, seeing how much you'll tolerate, how long you'll stay quiet, how far they can stretch your boundaries before you snap. And here's what I've learned. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it speaks in the first. No. The first. That's not okay. The first decision to walk away. And if things keep escalating, document everything. Every comment, every message, every moment that makes your gut twist. Because if you ever need to take action, your voice won't be the only proof, you'll have the record. Fear thrives in silence, but courage, it begins with awareness, and grows with every small act of defiance against discomfort. So speak, act, don't give them space to grow into a storm, because while they're testing you, you're teaching them, and you get to decide what kind of student they become. Do they learn that you're silent, or do they learn that you're steel? That's your power, that's your line. And when you draw it clearly, unapologetically, without flinching, they don't cross it, they retreat, because people who need confusion to control you can't survive in clarity. So make things clear, and don't wait for a big enough reason to set your boundaries. Your comfort is reason enough. Your peace is reason enough. You are reason enough. Remember, you are not here to absorb the impact of someone else's dissent. You are not here to be collateral damage in someone else's unraveling. You are here to stand, to speak, to protect the space you live in, mentally, emotionally, physically, and yes, some people will call you cold for it. Others will call you difficult, but the right people, they'll call you safe, and you deserve that, every single day. They wait, that's their power, not in speed, but in silence, not in attack, but in attachment, and when they strike, it's not sudden, it's surgical, precise, devastating, because by the time you see it, they're already too close. They've studied your rhythms, your fears, your fractures, and they've wrapped themselves in your trust like armor. This is the long game. Not every enemy comes with fire. Some come with flowers, with favors, with friendship, and in the beginning, they do everything right. They celebrate your wins, support your losses, they remember your birthday, they ask about your family. And you call them loyal, you call them rare, you call them one of the good ones. But behind the curtain, they're collecting every vulnerable story you shared, saying every detail about your schedule, your habits, your weaknesses, noted every insecurity you whispered, filed away for later. They don't need to rush. They know your walls are thick, but they also know you'll open a door for someone who seems to care. So they play the long game. They earn your trust the way a con artist earns applause, one perfect illusion at a time. You don't suspect anything. Why would you? They've never raised their voice, never made a direct move. But that's exactly why they're dangerous. They operate beneath detection. They don't confront. They blend. They don't oppose. They orbit. And then, when you've handed over enough, when you've depended on them just a little too much, when you're tangled in contracts, shared accounts, emotional ties, they make their move. Not with violence, not with betrayal loud and clear, but with quiet control. They delay an email that costs you a deal. They phrase a sentence just right to twist your words. They mention a personal detail in a room they shouldn't even be in. And you realize it wasn't random. It never was. It was a setup dressed as support. A trap disguised as teamwork. I've seen it happen. I've been on the edge of it myself. And let me be honest, realizing you were played not by an enemy, but by someone you trusted, it breaks something, not just in your view of them, but in your view of yourself. You wonder, how did I not see it? How could I have been so open? But that's what makes you human. That's what makes you good. And that's exactly what they exploit. They don't break in. You let them in. Because they didn't look like a threat. They looked like help. That's the insidiousness of the long game. They don't win by beating you. They win by becoming essential to you. And that's the lesson Stoicism teaches us. Not to close ourselves off from the world, but to see the world clearly, to trust not just words, but patterns, not just smiles, but consistency, not just promises, but presence under pressure. Because a real ally, they stand with you when there's nothing to gain, when it costs them something, when silence would be safer. But they speak up anyway. That's loyalty, and anything less, that's positioning. That's proximity masquerading as protection. So how do you protect yourself? You don't build a fortress. You build filters. You watch for over-interest. You notice who's always asking, but never sharing. You notice who listens too intently, but with eyes that don't match the empathy. You limit access, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. And you remember, intimacy isn't measured by closeness. It's measured by safety. If you don't feel safe sharing something, don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's not cold. That's calculated clarity. Because once someone has your map, they can guide, or they can ambush. So test people, not with traps, with time. Time is the ultimate revealer. People can pretend for weeks, for months, but not forever. Eventually, the mask slips, not because they get careless, but because the need for gain overrides the patience for pretense. And when it slips, you'll be glad you hadn't handed them the whole blueprint. I used to believe loyalty was automatic if love was present. I don't anymore. Love can be a performance. Loyalty, that's a pattern. It's how someone acts when the spotlight is off, when the crowd isn't watching, when you're down, difficult, or have nothing to offer. That's when true motives surface. Not when you win, but when you bleed. And the long game player, they vanish during the blood. Or worse, they capitalize on it. They use your fall to rise. And yet, despite everything, here's the most painful truth of all. Sometimes they don't even hate you. They just want what you have. Your peace, your network, your credibility. And in their mind, the easiest way to get it is to get close. Long enough to learn the code. Long enough to mimic your voice. Long enough to understand what breaks you. Then they step in, not as a friend, but as a replacement. That's why silence is your weapon. Stillness is your advantage, because when you observe without exposing, you catch the cracks before they widen. You see the drift before it becomes a collapse. You prepare, not out of paranoia, but out of principle. That's the Stoic way. We don't fear the storm. We build for it, because the storm isn't always thunder and wind. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it shakes your hand. Sometimes it calls you brother. And when it does, you won't flinch. You'll already know the truth. And you'll already be ready. They don't wear warning labels. They don't march in with threats. They arrive with stories, with smiles, with just enough charm to disarm you. That's how it always begins, with subtlety, with softness, with the illusion of safety. But if you've made it this far, you already know, threats rarely announce themselves. They build, quietly, steadily, patiently, until one day, what felt like a friendship feels more like a noose, and what you thought was support tightens. So if something deep in your gut has been whispering, listen to it. That whisper, it's not fear, it's foresight. Don't wait for the knife to strike to realize it was being sharpened every time you laughed off a jab. Every time you ignored a red flag. Every time you gave the benefit of the doubt to someone who never earned it. This is not about living in suspicion. This is about living awake. Awareness is not cynicism. It's clarity. It's the strength to observe without absorbing. To read the room without losing your rhythm. To know the storm is forming without running. Without panicking. Just preparing. Seneca said, "A sword never kills anybody by itself. It is merely the hand that wields it." But I'll take that further. The blade does nothing without proximity. And that's the danger. It's not the weapon. It's the closeness of the one who holds it. That's why vigilance matters. That's why your circle matters. Not because people are evil, but because motives can shift, intentions can twist, and the longer someone watches you without being seen, the more likely their presence becomes a pattern, and their silence becomes strategy. I've learned this through scars, not theories. I've trusted too fast, forgiven too much, and stayed too long in rooms where loyalty was faked better than love was shown. But I don't regret learning the hard way, because now, I stay sharp, not angry, not cold, sharp. I listen, not just to what's said, but to what's avoided. I watch, not for enemies, but for inconsistencies. I speak, not to be heard, but to test who's really listening. And when someone shows me who they are the first time, I believe them. Because here's the secret most don't tell you. Being untouchable isn't about building walls. It's about building wisdom, being so grounded in your values that manipulation finds no grip, so consistent in your boundaries that deception dies before it breathes, so confident in your silence that gossip loses its power. That's real strength, and that's the kind of strength no one can take from you. But here's where you come in. You've seen the signs. Now, what will you do with them? You can scroll on, forget, numb out, hope it never happens to you. Or, you can act. You can take one step today to clean your circle, to check your boundaries, to stop sharing your spirit with people who only come close to steal from it. You can ask yourself, who drains me? Who shows up when I'm rising, but disappears when I fall? Who wants access to my life, but avoids accountability in theirs? These questions don't create enemies. They reveal them, because not everyone who says, "I've got your back," deserves to be behind you. Not everyone who claps is a fan, and not everyone who watches is wishing you well. So protect your space like you protect your peace. Tightly, deliberately, unapologetically, and if they call you cold, distant, or difficult, good, let them talk. Let them spin stories around a version of you that no longer exists. Because the you that's emerging, that version is fireproof. That version has learned the art of listening without leaking, of giving without giving yourself away, of loving without losing yourself. So to everyone watching this right now, this is your moment to decide, to stay sharp, not just sometimes, not just after the damage, always, because the real war, it's not outside, it's in the small decisions you make every day. What you ignore, what you excuse, what you allow, and what you choose to become. So here's what I ask you to do before you go. Save this video, not for me, for you, to remind yourself that clarity is power, that awareness is armor, that silence is sometimes the loudest alarm. Comment below. I see clearly. Let the world know you're not asleep anymore, that you've seen the signs, that you're not easy prey, that you've learned to read behind the words, beneath the smiles, beyond the charm. And if this woke something up in you, watch the next part. Because silent threads rarely work alone. They travel in patterns, in circles, and the more you spot them, the more you stop them. This is Echoes of Stoicism, where knowledge is power, but action is what keeps you safe. Stay sharp, stay steady, and I'll see you in the next one.